last meeting of the year. And I'm Nancy Daubenberg. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation and the Chair of EQB. So why don't we go ahead and move forward with, well, first of all, let's go ahead and start recording the meeting and then go ahead with roll call. Or meeting announcements. I'm sorry. Normally we do the meeting announcements and then roll call. I gotta get my brain back in gear now that we're back in EQB mode.
Do you have any, Madam Chair? I've got mine going a little later. So
okay. Nope. Just if there was any other technology or announcements about the virtual, it's all virtual today. I think that's all we were gonna say there. But so I think we can go ahead and move on to roll call. If you don't have any other announcements.
Not at this time. All right, well, thank you. I will go ahead and call the roll. Commissioner Arnold, are you on with us? Board Member Bakken. Board Member Bauerkemper.
Present, thanks.
Thank you. I don't believe that Commissioner Cunningham is joining us, so we have Assistant Commissioner Myra Kunis. Myra, are you with us?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Indeed.
And Chair Daubenberger, you are here.
Here.
Board Member Foster.
Here.
Commissioner Gronvall. Commissioner Gronvall. Board Member Hintz.
Here.
Board Member Katzenberger.
Here.
Commissioner Kessler.
Present.
Thank you. Board Member Martin.
Here.
I don't believe Commissioner Verlick could join us today, so we have Deputy Commissioner McKinnon.
Here.
Thank you. Board Member Nelson.
Present.
Okay. I believe Commissioner Peterson could not be with us. We have Assistant Commissioner Jesseth.
Yes, good afternoon.
Thank you. Commissioner Stroman.
Here.
Thank you. Board Member Holman.
I am here.
Awesome. And then I believe we have Sue Vento from Met Council joining us as opposed to Chair Zelli. And I know, okay. I think she is with us. I know we sometimes have problems with with her sound. So this is Sue Vento on with us? Okay, excellent. Sue is here. And I think Commissioner Gronvall, did I just see you sign in? Guessing we might be waiting for her mic there.
Oh, here. Yep, she's coming.
Okay. All right. At any rate, Madam Chair, I think we have at least 10, and if with Commissioner Gronvall joining us, I believe we are at 11, which is a quorum for this meeting, which would be 9. There's Commissioner Gronvall. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. And so then, since we have a quorum, we can move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. So that's the meeting minutes from November 15th, 2023, and the preliminary agenda for today's meeting, the January 17th, 2024 meeting. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Commissioner Kessler. I will make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Kessler. May I have a second?
Dan Katzenberger, I'll second.
Thank you, Board Member Katzenberger. Any discussion on the motion? All right, then all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, no, hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the consent agenda is adopted. So now I'll turn it to Executive Director Nuschler for her Executive Director report. Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for being here for our January meeting. We did choose to do this one fully virtual because of the always fun likelihood of winter weather in Minnesota in January. Although then for those of us, at least down here in the cities, it wasn't clear that winter would actually make it. But despite that, it is a little chilly. So kind of glad that we didn't make you all travel very far today. So a reminder for logistics for today's meeting, the meeting is being recorded as it says on your screen. We do have the meeting chat that is open and visible to everybody. However, as a reminder, the chat is not kept as part of the meeting records, so it should only be used for logistical issues. Board members, we will welcome your questions and feedback throughout the meeting. Feel free to use the raise hand function or jump in during discussions. You should be able to mute and unmute yourself. As we were noting earlier, when you first sign on, you are not able to, and sometimes the little warning that you can't unmute yourself is a little sticky, but you should be able to unmute. And if you can't, please note that in the chat. And it is, again, helpful to have your camera on when you're speaking. For members of the public, we will be taking public comment during two parts of this meeting. One time period specific to the environment and energy report, and then a general time period at the end of the meeting. And so just a reminder here of our procedures for public comment. Since we're all online, when we get to that portion of the agenda, please use the raised hand feature to let us know that you have a comment to share, and then keep your hand raised until after you give your comment. We'll queue commenters when we arrive at the appropriate point in the agenda, and we'll notify you when you can unmute and speak. And again, there might be a lag. So this will just show you where that raise hand button is on the top of the screen. If you need a reminder, the procedures and guidelines are on page 2 of the meeting packet, and there's troubleshooting info. So when we get there for public comment, please raise your hands. And I know we have lots of folks listening in, so I expect we'll have some good public comment today. Moving on to just my report and announcements, a reminder to everyone that as public officials, your statements of economic interest are due to the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board by January 29th. I think that information should have gotten to all of you. There are a few additional requirements this year, so if you've done it before, read the new yellow piece of paper that has new things on it for those statements of economic interest. Next month in February, we will be going through some annual process steps that we need to do. By rule, we do need to elect a vice chair. Board member Martin has served capably in that role for this past year. And then we do need to figure out who wants to serve in that role next year. And if you are interested or willing to serve, please reach out to the chair or to me so that we can do that next month. We also on the agenda is a reauthorization of the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee, or ERIS. There's some confusion in the records about how many members should be on the committee, whether it's 8 members or 10. And I want to get that clarified. And also 10 members would actually be more than a quorum of our board, which I think would be inappropriate for a subcommittee. So we want to make sure that we have that committee at the right size. Public members, we have 4 commissioners, and then public members Bauer, Kemper, Hintz, and Nelson currently serve on the ERIS committee. And so we also do need one more public member, someone with some background in environmental review. If folks are interested in serving in that role, if you would let me know, or let the chair know about your willingness to continue or to be on that committee moving forward, that would be great. We would like to get that committee fully, staffed up with all of its members next month. That committee will be meeting in March in lieu of the regular board meeting. That's the current plan. Of course, you can all always attend the committee meeting. In terms of appointments, we are still waiting for our new CD5 member and confirmation of, and then also Nick's term has officially expired, but he is able to stay on with us until he is reappointed or until a new person is appointed. And we do expect that appointments are likely in February. The last major thing I have is just to let all of you know that the EQB website is being upgraded to a new platform, new content management system as of this evening. All the electrons in the internet will change over and our new website will load. At this point, it's not a major content change. It's just sort of a behind the scenes change, but it's going to look really very different. And hopefully will provide us with some really great opportunities moving forward to make the website more accessible and streamlined and easier to navigate. We are making some of those changes in connection with the upgrade. So hopefully a few more things like the EAW form and the EQB monitor are a little more visible and one-click accessible, but we're very excited about that upgrade and the new tools it will give us for website management. But just a warning that possibly all your bookmarks will break and you'll need to find things again tomorrow. And I'll be looking first thing in the morning to make sure everything's gone smoothly. So if you can't find something that you need, please reach out and let us know. And Madam Chair, I think that is it for my executive director's report today.
Great. Thank you, Executive Director Nuschler. So does anyone have any questions for Catherine this time on the report out? Not seeing or hearing any, but I will echo what Catherine said. Thanks to our vice chair, board member Martin, for serving in the vice chair role over the last year. And he has indeed stepped in for me a few different times to help out with the chairing of the meeting. I very much appreciated that. And so, yeah, if anyone else is interested in that role, moving forward for the next year, let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about that. And thanks for considering. And thanks for considering membership on ARIS for the group going forward too. All right, so with that, then that brings us to our next item, which is the work plan update. And so with that, I turn it back to you, I believe, Executive Director Nuschler.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I am going to try to share my screen in a new way that I learned and now am having problems remembering how to do. So if you'll just bear with me for a minute.
Colleen, do I have to have my slides like loaded on my computer? If they're not in your recent PowerPoint, then you have to grab them from your browser, wherever you have them saved.
Okay. Sorry, we're trying to do this new way where I can better see my notes while still sharing things with you. But I am not finding it. So we'll go with the old version at the moment, and hopefully that will be fine. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I just wanted to give a quick run through of the work plan that we put together back in August and kind of how things are going as we are kind of halfway through the fiscal year at this point. And we've been working on a lot of things kind of quietly. I wanted to give you an update and also give you a chance to let me know if there are things that you want to hear about and you want us to bring to a board meeting in the future. So just starting a little bit about what we've been working on in the environmental review program. Jesse has been ably leading and looking into our environmental review data collection and reviewing the metrics that have been used for a long time about how environmental review is being done. Really, when we look at those metrics, many of them are about how much are we doing and not necessarily giving us a great sense of how well are things going. And so that's something that we want to consider, and we want to be able to more easily evaluate program effectiveness and not just count things, how many things are being done. Things like the number of reviews and technical assistance that's being offered, though those counts remain important. So this is going to be something that ARIS will start to hear about in March, is the plan at the moment, to get an update on some of the metrics that have been used for a long time in terms of how many environmental reviews are done, and to start to talk about what other metrics we might want to add to our regular evaluation of environmental review. So then also going on in environmental review, one of our really big projects for 2024 will be the mandatory categories report. And so the required review that we work on with our partner agencies that looks at the mandatory categories and the thresholds, and where we can start to say, are we evaluating the right things in environmental review, the right kinds of projects at the right thresholds? So we've been meeting with the state agency responsible governmental units for feedback, and we've been reviewing the input that we got from the continuous improvement process. Kayla has been leading that effort, and she and the team will be launching engagement for other RGUs, particularly local governments, and for the public in February, so that we start to get that feedback about what information or what changes they would like to see to the mandatory categories. And once we have that information from that evaluation and that engagement campaign, we will come to you all and let you know which direction and how things are looking for the mandatory categories report, which is due at the end of the year in December. We also, too many words to evaluate on this slide, but we also, as part of that engagement on the mandatory categories report, are going to be asking some questions about the decision criteria for environmental review. We think there's some questions that people have about them, and we want to evaluate the needs for those criteria. What kinds of issues are folks having? What questions do they have? Are there changes that we need to be working on, or guidance, or how will those work? So there's going to be some key questions in that mandatory categories engagement about decision criteria. And then the team will be moving forward with that evaluation, and we'll bring back to you at some point in the next year or so some proposals for how we might, how we may need to either improve the decision criteria, better support people's ability to use the decision criteria, and so on. Colleen will be leading that part. Also, this month basically marks 1 full year of implementation of the climate assessment in EAW form. That the form for EAWs that included climate information was launched in December of 2022. So it's been a year. We know there's a lot of questions out in the world, and a lot of people who are interested in really doing some good work here, and a lot of folks who have a lot of questions about how to do it better. So as you all recall, we got money from the legislature to develop a greenhouse gas emissions calculator and hire a staff person to support that work and to develop source sector guidance. And I'm very excited to say that the staff person, Stephanie Aho, will be starting with us next Wednesday. I'm really pleased to bring her on to guide that work. And then also we're getting fairly close to issuing the contract. So we should really be able to dive into the climate calculator work in February. We're going to continue to update the overall guidance document on climate, and we'll be continuing to look into and potentially issue some source specific guidance. So the environmental review team and our new staff person will be working on that. The team is also starting to really get into planning how to update the main 2010 and 2013 guidance documents that are on our website. To figure out what updates they need. The rules have changed since those documents have been put together. And our new website should provide a better platform for us to update the guidance. We're also identifying additional guidance needs. So that's another big project that the team has been working on, that we've been taking in a lot of information, thinking through a lot of things, and I think are getting into a really good place to move that forward. We also have done some tribal outreach. Kayla, as our tribal point of contact, has led this. As many of you know, we have drafted a preliminary policy for coordination and consultation with tribes. We shared it with the tribes and have asked for feedback. To date, we haven't gotten much feedback, but it is a place where we will always be open to input. And so we will be bringing that policy forward to you all here in the next few months. We also had a really great discussion with the Minnesota Tribal Environmental Council on environmental review in early December, and identified key areas of interest around the environmental review program and how we can improve it, how we can make sure it honors tribal sovereignty and tribal knowledge about all their resources, and also how it can better improve consideration of tribal cultural resources. And I think there's a lot of interest in updating the form and or the guidance for environmental review to ensure that there's appropriate consideration of those cultural resources. So that is something else that we will be looking into, especially as in combination with the guidance that we were talking about. So many of these things in the preliminary stages, and we will bring them to you as they progress. Also, just a note, right? The environmental review online services and tool implementation has been on board, has been up and running since a little bit before the beginning of this fiscal year with the EQB monitor notice submittal, the environmental review map and database. And overall, I think we have been pretty happy with that. That being out there. I was meeting with a city this morning that is going to do an AUAR for the first time, and they have really appreciated being able to look at the database, look at AUARs that other cities have done. It has not been, I would say, particularly the monitor submittal has not been without hiccups, but Jesse and Hazel have kept that running and getting all the information in and the monitor going out. So I think really keeping that running and moving has been a great accomplishment. And then I'll probably mention this like 5 times today because we're also very excited about the website migration. This is a little snapshot. It's not perfect, but it is going to have a bit of a cleaner look and give us better tools to move towards an easier to use and navigate website. So all goes well overnight. This will be a big check mark off our list to get that migration done. And thanks to Priscilla, who's been leading that with our Minute folks. Obviously, we have in other news, the Environment and Energy Report, which we'll be talking about here in a moment, led by Priscilla, taking over after Eric Dahl started that work, and then with the assistance that we're so grateful for from all of our state agency partners. The Pollinator Action Framework that you all approved in the fall, and moving on to the implementation phase. Rebecca's been working closely with the interagency pollinator team on that work, and she's also been doing a lot of research and planning to understand the sort of regulatory environment and what might be happening with genetically engineered organisms, and whether these organisms are coming into Minnesota and when, and how we might have to activate our regulatory program and our rules in Minnesota 4420 that have to do with that. So that's also on our agenda to bring back to you all in the next couple of months. We are also continuing to think about the Environmental Congress with the E&E report and the website wrapping up. Priscilla's going to have some real capacity to think and develop the Congress. She and I have been talking and reworking the plan. We had some great discussions with board member Katzenberger and some local stakeholders last week. So we'll be looking at late September or early October to do that Congress. So more to come there. In terms of water, there's a water plan report out in the fall. We're continuing to think about how we can improve the reporting and the coordination on some of the big water issues, including nitrate. And also in the last legislative session, there was a directive to publish fish kill notifications in the EQB monitor, and that is going well. Again, thanks to Jesse and Hazel getting those and working with MPCA to get those into the EQB monitor. So I think that is the end of my slideshow there. Kind of a really fast, quick overview of what we've been working on this year, and I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of good work being done. Does anyone have any questions for Executive Director Nuschler on the work plan? I am not seeing or hearing anything.
I have a question.
Oh,
Chair.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Executive Director Nuschler. So, one question about the EQB monitor publication of fish kills. I think, it's great that we are making all of those pieces come together. When did that become on, when did that kick off? And have we had any fish kills since then?
Yes, so that went into effect. We started it in August. And so there were quite a few fish kills in the first couple of months. And so there haven't been many recently in the winter, but yes, we have. It isn't an automated process yet. There is a lot of still manual work happening. So that's actually one of the other things that is on our IT agenda, is to get that automated. So we're working with MPCA's IT folks so that it's a little more efficient for everybody.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So I think, yeah, that's helpful to know that it worked this fall and that we're continuing to improve it. And do people then, anybody who signs up to get the EQB monitor gets notified? Is that how that works? Or can you self-select to say, I would like to know when it's reported in the monitor that a fish kill has occurred?
The monitor sign up is just, you get the whole monitor. So it has all the announcements, the general announcements, the environmental review notices, and the fish kill. It all goes in one package.
Great. Thank you for those questions, Commissioner Kessler. Anyone else with questions? Don't think I'm seeing or hearing any. So with that, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, and the bigger part of our agenda today, the Environment and Energy Report Card. So with that, we'll have Priscilla Watt, Communications and Engagement Coordinator with EQB, present the report card, and that's on page 27 of your packet. So Priscilla, are you ready to go? She is. Welcome, Priscilla.
And Madam Chair, I apologize for not letting you know about this. We're actually doing a little switcheroo. Priscilla does not have much of a voice today. And so I'm going to go through the slides, and she is available, and we have all of the folks that were available or that helped put this together on so that they can answer questions. So we will turn it over to the team for questions, but just to save Priscilla's voice, I'm going to go through the slides. So apologies for the lack of communication on that portion of the agenda. And I'm sorry to everybody that I'm pinch hitting and you get a whole lineup of me talking at you today. Not my goal, but so it goes. So
thank you for stepping in and helping with that.
So I'm going to go through these, and I do expect that we're going to have a fair bit of discussion and questions here. So for the Environment and Energy Report Card, am I sharing yet, Hazel, or is it not working?
I
am, okay.
I can see a slide that says agenda. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, thank you. So we're just going to briefly talk about the background and purpose, what changed from the 2019 report, give a brief overview of the metrics and how we laid them out. I'm not going to go in depth and present on every single metric that's in the report. You have the report in front of you, and that felt like a lot to just go through each one in detail, but we're happy to take questions on any of them when we get to that point. Then we're going to talk a little bit about considerations for the next report and a few things that we already know we need to tweak in this version before it goes out. So just as background, the Environment and Energy Report Card in its current form was initially a result of an executive order which directed EQB to help determine which environmental problems of interdepartmental concern to state government it should report on. And so the report is, sorry about that, represents a collaborative effort to evaluate the environment, Minnesota's environment, and then it does really, many of the metrics are tied to goals that are kept by the individual state agencies, and the goals and the metrics, mostly the metrics, were established through extensive interagency dialogue when the report was first put together. And the metrics were chosen by the agencies based on various kinds of state or federal goals. So EQB currently works with 7 state agencies to update, report, and write the narratives for each metric. And we also hope, our plan is to be able to use the report as part of the Environmental Congress, talk about some of the issues that are at play, that are discussed in the report, and the solutions, and to bring that forward to the Environmental Congress. The intended audience for this report card are the public and decision makers. It is designed to provide a snapshot of how the state is doing on environmental issues and the progress that we've made along the way. Our hope is to inform Minnesotans of at least some of the major issues impacting our air, climate, land, and water, and to provide an update on how those issues are being addressed. And so we hope that the report can also just guide decision makers on where to prioritize or act on important decisions that impact our environment and climate. And most importantly, by really bringing together goals that oftentimes otherwise are very dispersed and talked about in different places, it aims to provide a shared understanding on the state of our environment and a way to start conversations. So while most of the metrics didn't change from the 2019 report card, and our plan was really to do an update and not make major changes, a few of the metrics have had their goals updated based primarily on state legislative changes that changed our goals, particularly around climate and energy. We also did some combining of a few metrics, such as ones on transportation and fuel use, and to help us tell a better story around the behaviors and trends on travel. And we've also included notes to align with Minnesota's climate action framework in sections that are tied to these goals. And not a change, but I think one of the benefits of doing this report at this time is it does allow us to see some of the things that happened and the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then will allow us to see sort of how those maybe continue or disappear moving forward. Another update in this version of the report was just a shift in the way we conceptually organize the metrics. We wanted to be really clear where we were measuring the conditions of the environment and reporting on how that condition was changing versus the actions that we're taking to address the environmental issues. And that makes it more clear, I think, and easy to understand what is directly under our control and ability to quickly change, that being our actions, and then how the actions can over time affect the condition of Minnesota's environment. And here's just an example of how that shows up in the report, where we have things labeled within the air and climate section with either a condition or an action. So the first grouping of condition and action metrics are in the air and climate section. So there's measures about air pollution, particularly especially fine particles, asthma and pollution related health problems, and then about greenhouse gas emissions and climate pollution related impacts we're seeing in heat, rainfall, and forests, for example. Some of the things we see in this section of the report is that Canadian wildfires, industrial processes, and transportation are some of the main contributors to our air pollution, both locally and across the state. And that these factors and structural inequities are leading to worse asthma cases among low income and Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. I think one of the things in putting these two pieces together, obviously air and climate pollution, particularly that created by combustion, can often be addressed by many of the same actions, whether that's reducing fuel use in transportation, electricity production, and home heating. And so many of the actions that are laid out in the climate action framework are also going to address some of the issues causing poor air quality from other pollution, while also reducing Minnesota's contribution to the big picture climate change that's exacerbating some of the causes of air pollution, such as forest fires. This section also includes measures on materials management, managing our waste through that time-honored triad of reduce, reuse, recycle. The report provides a lot of information that while recycling is still important, reusing items and reducing our consumption results in greater climate benefits. And this does have our metrics about overall in Minnesota, climate pollution emissions in 2020 were about 23% below 2005 levels. And there were significant reductions in pollution from electricity generation and in transportation. It will be very interesting to see the transportation metrics moving forward because, again, the pandemic changed all of that, and we really saw more emission reductions than expected. So future years may well show this bouncing back up, particularly in transportation section. So something to watch as we continue to do this kind of reporting. The next kind of grouping of condition and action metrics are on water and land. So these metrics focus on water quality and quantity, land conversion, and public land protection. In the water section, we focus on the health of lakes and streams and their ability to support in-lake recreation and a healthy population of fish in streams. Minnesota has a really strong water monitoring program thanks to the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment and the Clean Water Fund. And there's a lot of work being done to restore and protect all of our waters to ensure that they meet water quality goals. And we're also seeing and reporting on here efforts to restore previously impaired lakes and streams being successful. I think here and in the last fall, we have recently talked about nitrate and the concerns about nitrate concentrations in groundwater that supplies drinking water. And I expect that we will be continuing to talk much more about this issue further a little bit later this year. So there is a 3-page spread on nitrate in the report. Nitrate in groundwater, as we've said, is a concern in areas where the aquifers are vulnerable to contamination from the land surface, such as in southeast Minnesota. In other areas, concentrations of nitrate are quite low. And so the report aims to provide an overview of the concerns and the available data, and really bring out that although there's multiple state agencies and programs that work on this issue, we're really aiming at the same things and the same kinds of actions that will ensure people are not drinking water with high levels of nitrate, that we're reducing nitrate use and making sure it stays where it's put and not lost to water. So then in terms of water sustainability in general, Minnesota has a good supply of water, but is seeing increasing demand from domestic agricultural and industrial users, and it constrains water resources. And I think particularly this can be a concern in times of drought. Overall, however, the report shows that water use per capita has decreased over time. And then on the land side, we talk a bit about land conversion and land acquisition. Despite growing population within Minnesota, reuse and cleanup of existing sites, reuse of existing buildings, smaller lots, and more apartments and multifamily dwellings have contributed to more efficient land use and reduce the rate at which we convert land from our natural areas and farmland. So that's a really super high level run through on the metrics, and we'll be happy to dig into any more that you all want to talk about. I do want to talk a little bit about what we're thinking for the next report. This is something that's generally been done every 2 years and that we would like to consider and keep doing moving forward. And we know things have changed since 2012 when there was a real big review of the metrics and the decisions about which ones should be put in this report. And so while many environmental issues that everybody thought was critical in 2012 certainly still are, and that climate, nitrate, those other issues. There are other other issues that have emerged that maybe aren't reflected in this report. And I know we've heard from some folks that PFAS is one that they're wondering why it's not in here. And so while our goal this time was to do an update before too much time had passed since the prior version, you know, before we do the next one, we do want to work to gather the teams from the agencies, work with them, and then discuss with the board and our partners and stakeholders what additional metrics might be needed to be addressed. And then we also want to look into how we can make the report a little more interactive, easier to update on a more regular basis, give ourselves more ability to look at trends over time more clearly. So those are all things we're thinking about as we consider how best to continue this report and move it forward into the future. I will note that since the version you received in the packet, we do know that there are some additional things that need to be tweaked and added. We'll note too that the main report has always been accompanied by a more detailed explanation of how the data is assembled and where it comes from, and that's still in production, but it will go on our website to support the report when we release it, which we're hoping will be in early February. So since the packet distribution, we've identified that we do need to improve some graphics in terms of resolution and some pictures to make sure we're using Minnesota-based ones. There's some very sunny, nice palm trees in a few of the pictures that maybe are not what it looks like outside at the moment. And changing some layouts, just moving things around. So none of those would be substantive changes to the information presented. Also, there's some minor errors that need to be corrected. We somehow misremembered that Minnesota has 81 watersheds when in fact there are 80, so we need to fix that. And there needs to be some additional clarity provided around the national asthma objectives versus Minnesota objectives, and a few other minor errors that do need to be fixed up. There's also some additional data available. So there's updated stats on recycling and materials management that are updated to 2023 numbers that I think were not included in the version of the report that went out in your packet. So those are things we know we will need to fix, and we are certainly open to other recommendations in this after discussion today. So finally, just recognition of all the agency staff that helped gather the data and the narratives that were put together in this report, and our tech reps helped us get into the right folks and get that information at the different agencies. So thank you to everybody who participated, and I want to give my thanks to Eric Dahl, who started this out last fall, and I think last fall, I've lost track of time. And then to Priscilla for wrangling the pieces together as we finished it. It was a great team effort. So that is what we have on the overview presentation. And I think at this point, we're happy to go into discussion. I think we have plenty of time for discussion here at this point on the agenda.
Well, thank you, Executive Director Nuschler, for going through that. And thank you, Priscilla, for putting that together, and both of you being available here for questions. And thanks for the whole team who worked on it that you showed on the last slide. I know there has been a tremendous amount of work going into this update. And so with that, yeah, let's go on to board members' questions or comments, just general discussion. So I'll look for a hand to be raised, or you can just jump in if I'm not seeing your hand. Go ahead, Commissioner Arnold.
Kevin, can you help me understand how this relates to some of the other reports that, like, we have a greenhouse gas emissions report that we do with MPCA. There are a few others. Like, I recognized all of the data in it, but it was like compiled in a different way. And so can you help like orient to this compared to other things that we are doing or other departments are doing?
To some extent, I think I can. I don't know that I know them all in exact detail, but I think really the idea is to take metrics that primarily are already being used and to put them together in a sort of a comprehensive look that spans across multiple parts of the environment, rather than being sort of in their own little pieces. That's how I see it, is that it helps give us that broader look, putting things together in that way. But I don't think in any case there's like brand new data being compiled for any of these metrics.
Okay, that's helpful.
Right, other questions or comments? Go ahead, Public Board Member Nelson.
Yeah, I had just kind of a handful, and I think most of these are very minor, because I was very impressed with the amount of information that you had packed into this. But on page 5, there's a mention about mega rains greater than 3 inches increasing. But I'm increasing compared to what? Is it? I'm assuming it's frequency or their number or something like that. So that was one observation. Another one on page 6. This is the carbon storage forests one, and when I look at the graphic that is shown there, in terms of the storage in the forests, I see it going up by, was it 2 million? But then in the upper corner, the rating is that this metric is getting worse, and somehow that's escaping me. So could someone explain that conclusion, the trend versus what the graphic's showing in terms of the amount of storage?
I think hopefully
Oh, I heard an echo there. Do you want to try again, Catherine? You were saying something.
Yes, Madam Chair, I was hoping someone from DNR might be able to explain their rating there. And I'm sorry, I don't know, or Priscilla, if there's someone that worked on it. There is the metrics and the way the ratings are chosen are part of that supplemental document that is not quite finished yet. So that probably would have helped with that question there. Yeah.
Hi, this is Priscilla. I have a little bit of background context on this metric. I believe the reason that the status and trend are not improving, even though you see the chart on the right, increasing, is because the overall impacts from climate change are increasing to our Minnesota forests. And so I think the impacts to forests, regardless of carbon storage and sequestration increasing, is not more than the impacts that we're seeing to forests as a result of climate change. And so I don't know if someone from DNR is on to go into more detail, but that's my understanding of it.
Sure.
Thanks, Priscilla. I'll just pause a little longer to see if anyone wants to add to that.
I'm sorry, I know Board Member Nelson had a few other items.
Yeah, so the explanation will be included in the supplemental documentation. Because as I look at it, I would say, impacts to forests would be sort of lumped into that overall net increase or not, and be sort of in that unless there's some explanation to that effect. A couple other real quick things would be page 7. The graphic that's in the middle there, the x-axis to me doesn't make sense. I'm assuming that that's 10-year periods or something, but that's not what the axis says.
Yeah. Hi, this is Priscilla. Yes, that's correct. And I believe our designer is working on a better graphic for this section. So this is one of the charts that's being updated to be a little clearer.
Thanks, Priscilla. And Board Member Nelson, want to go off of mute, and it looks like you have other comments.
Yeah, sorry about that. When I switch over to the document, it turns my mic off. So, sustainable materials management. That seems, and maybe it's just me, but it seems to me that that's written at a different level. Maybe for me to understand better, it needs smaller words. or possibly the explanation of what sustainable materials management is needs to come earlier in the description. It's not till you get to the second column that that's really defined. And then my last one on page 15. And that is, there's a graphic in the upper right that has 2 pie charts in it. And one says initial and one says final. But the text doesn't talk about final at all, so it confused me a little bit. That's it. And overall, very well done.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll just,
go ahead.
I'll just that last one on page 15. I know that is one place where we have gotten updated graphic descriptions. So I know that one is on the list to be updated.
Great, thank you. All right, and then why don't we go to the next one with their hand up? That is Board Member Martin. Go ahead, Member Martin.
Thanks, Chair Daubenberger. I'll just follow suit with Board Member Nelson. I have a few minor things. I think overall, I thought this was really informative and really well put together. So thanks to Priscilla and all the agency folks. I noticed, I think there's four kind of suggestions that I wanted to put out there. And I'll do it same as Paul with going by page. On page 4, so page 30, I guess, of the packet, it didn't totally make sense to me that the status of that asthma indicator is good when right below it, it shows that it's not good for communities of color and low-income communities. So I understand like the broader statewide trend could be good, but it's hard for me to reconcile an overall good status with, 83% for the communities of color and so on. So maybe a little bit more thought around that, or at least explanation on the overall status. The second one I had was on page 10. This is just a very minor one, but because I work in this world of renewable and carbon-free electricity, I think it would be helpful that the second chart shows the total carbon-free electricity share statewide, but the first chart doesn't show the total renewables. It shows each individual renewable, but I think it would be instructive to add a line to that one that says, basically adds together the lines below it and shows the total renewable electricity generation share, because I think the purple is just wind, it's not the total. So that's a real minor one. The next thing, and this is sort of comparing page 7 and page 11. So on page 7, that's the standard MPCA greenhouse gas inventory chart, and it shows how different sectors are doing. And so there you can see that there's generally an increase in industrial, commercial, and residential. And, you know, a fair amount of that increase is from natural gas use, some other fossil fuels in industry and commercial, but in residential, it's a lot natural gas use. So like that chart shows that like those are sectors that need attention at the statewide level, right? But when you get to page 11, it's about household heating and, you know, like talks about more air source heat pumps, and that's really useful for the residential part slice there. More air source heat pumps can be part of the solution to decarbon, you know, to use less natural gas, use cleaner electricity to heat homes. But that doesn't really speak to how do we address the industrial and commercial sources and use of natural gas. You know, and I think there are some other solutions under exploration, renewable natural gas, hydrogen, other things that that maybe are worth mentioning. So that my point here is just that like there's on page 11, there's one piece of what the state's doing, but it doesn't address all the sectors on page 7. And then the last thing I wanted to just thought I had, and this I don't think this is a broader question. It doesn't actually get to the report card, but on page 19, basically page 19 says that the state is buying about 9,000 acres of land and putting into public lands per year. And it talks about the SLAM goals, the criteria by which, you know, the state prioritizes land acquisitions. And I just wonder if again, this is not for the report card necessarily, but I think it would be great to have a conversation around whether returning a certain portion of those purchased lands to tribal control or to tribal co-management could become a state goal that's also tracked. Again, you know, if that's not been a goal adopted before, we can't just stick it in the report card and assess ourselves against it. But I would be interested in that kind of conversation. You know, just considering that there have been some recent real success stories in land acquisition and returning control to tribes or co-managing with tribes, things like that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Board Member Martin. And E.D. Muschler or Priscilla, do either one of you want to respond to any of that, or were you just taking notes on that?
I was taking notes, Madam Chair. I did see Commissioner Stroman raise her hand, and I wondered if she wanted to speak to that last piece.
Sure, yeah. Why don't we go to Commissioner Stroman?
Thank you, Chair Daubenberger, and to Member Martin's thoughtful comment. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context on that particular piece on acquired acres in the state's portfolio and the strategic land asset management goal. That is a DNR goal that is being adopted into this report. The strategic land asset management program and goals is really how DNR approaches managing the portfolio of lands that we manage to ensure that that portfolio is maximizing potential to meet mission for the state, right? Like the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So just like you would, you know, move assets around in a retirement portfolio to make sure you are meeting your retirement goals, we move assets around in our land portfolio to make sure that we are at any point in time maximizing mission. And so those goals really reflect how we address lands that are, again, in the state's portfolio for state goals. To your question about like return of tribal lands, we are actually working on a project to incorporate alongside like the goals for our strategic land asset management. How do we also develop some criteria that would help us evaluate potential, you know, return of tribal lands, either by our own, you know, looking at our portfolio and assessing what might be reasonable, or as we receive requests from tribal governments, how do we evaluate those requests in light of, you know, what's good for the tribe, what's good for the state, are there outcomes for best? And then to your point, it may not be a complete ownership transfer, but there may be opportunities for something in between in co-management. So I just wanted to share that like this goal here really comes from the DNR and our transparency about how are we making decisions about state lands that we manage, you know, on behalf of Minnesotans. But to your point, we are working to incorporate that tribal lands piece, and I would love to chat more about that or have our you know, as our team works on that. I think we're just finishing up and getting ready to pilot some of that criteria. You know, we'd love to share more information about that.
Great. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments and questions, Board Member Nelson, and thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Why don't we go to the next hand up? I see Board Member Foster. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I also just want to, a couple comments, but also want to say this is a great report. I mean, I really like seeing all of this data in one document, and it's, you know, very well done. And I love all the categories. This document, you know, is really useful for being able to show members of the public, you know, what's going on. So I think all of them, you know, looking through to make sure it's immediately clear to people, you know, what it's getting at. And the one thing I want to say was go back to page 6, Board Member Nelson's comment there, that I do encourage you to look at how this carbon storage and sequestration might fit, because it seems to fit uneasily here in terms of a condition of how climate change is affecting forests, because it, in some ways, it fits more as an action or a result that we would hope to see, you know, if we have more land devoted to forest, as we increase the percentage of land devoted to forest. So more explanation might be useful on this page, but it might be that this doesn't necessarily belong here if the focus here is focusing on how the changing climate is affecting forests negatively. And the beetle is one issue, but there's other ways in which forests are being affected negatively. So I would expect to see the trend be negative, but as Board Member Nelson says, it doesn't square too well with the increase in sequestration, which isn't really a result of climate change. It's something that I would expect this would be a result of increasing the percentage of land that is in forest. And the other thing was just, again, to increase the clarity, that I see there's two, you know, big areas here, air and climate and water and land. And it might be useful to have the table of contents reflect that there's those two big areas. Of course, I wouldn't want to mess up the formatting there. You have it all nicely there, but it'd be nice to have, you know, one area is air and climate, the second's water and land, and then you have the conditions and actions in both of those.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Foster. Anyone want to speak to what he raised, or just take a note on that? Okay. All right, well then, why don't we go to the next hand up? I see Board Member Bauer-Kemper. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a real brief comment that probably primarily reflects my lack of understanding. And Board Member Martin mentioned these graphs on page 10 regarding energy. And the way that I'm looking at them, if the 32% in the graph in the middle of the page on carbon-free electricity generation, if that's the same 32% or 32.4% from the graph on the left, I would think that biomass should not be counted as carbon-free generation. I think biomass is probably renewable, but not carbon-free. And they may be carbon-free and renewable might be getting conflated here, but I'm not sure. And so someone who better understands what's going on there should just take a quick look at that and confirm that it's doing what we want it to do, or tweak it if not. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I'll pause to see if anyone wants to speak on that. All right. Any other comments or questions, general discussion on the report card? Okay. I am not seeing any, but why don't at this time, then we're going to do public comment. So as Executive Director Nuschler explained at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to have two public comment periods, the typical one at the very end of the meeting, and then one now specific to the report card. So why don't we go ahead and go to the public comment period where we talk about it and consider it further. So members of the public, please raise your hand in Teams if you'd like to comment. And believe, Jesse, will you be calling on them and unmuting them?
Yes, I will monitor the chat for hand raisings here.
Thank you.
And just remind everybody where the button is on your screen. If need be.
Okay, Madam Chair, it looks like we have one hand raised here. We have Valeria Peralta with her hand raised. Once you're ready, I'll have Hazel promote them, and they should be good to go now to unmute and make their comment.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Good afternoon,
Hello,
Valeria.
can
Go
everyone
ahead.
hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Can hear you.
Hi, well, my name is Valeria Peralta, and I'm with Meet This Moment. Wanted to say thank you for what must have been a great deal of work to compile this report card, touching on so many issues. I would like to focus this comment on the air pollution section. So it was really alarming for me to read that 10% of the deaths in the state have air pollution as a contributing factor, as well as 48 out of the 365 days having poor air quality. And yet the topic of air pollution was still labeled as fair. In that same section, the topic of the Canadian wildfires was touched upon. But no significant connection was made to the fact that the burning of fossil fuels is exacerbating the climate disruption with extreme heat, dryness, and that fuels these fires that are preventing Minnesotans from being able to be outside in the summer, also driving these various serious health risks. It's my concern that the report isn't really highlighting the root issues of air pollution and their severity, especially with the labeling of it as fair.
Thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Right.
Madam Chair, next we have Brock Lawhead with their hand raised.
Go ahead.
Looks like they have been promoted, and Brock, you should be able to unmute.
Go ahead, Brock.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, hello, my name is Brock, and I'm a Minnesotan from Austin. And I just wanted to speak to the section on water sustainability. In the report, it has a, quote, good rating. And I just wanted to note that while statewide water usage by households remains stable with increased efficiency despite population growth, the increase in excessive water demand in our state comes from agriculture and irrigation. You know, those little western Minnesota aquifers and the extreme periods of drought mentioned due to climate change result in overuse and drying up of groundwater. And although the state has seen more water on average due to climate change, this rain typically comes in excessive amounts and runs off without replenishing these aquifers. This phenomenon is called a climate trap. And so I was wondering, how can the report card highlight individual conservation efforts, yet draw that stark contrast with the excessive groundwater use in agriculture, particularly in potato production, which undermines overall conservation gains? And I want to thank the people for putting on this meeting and for putting this report together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brock, for that comment. And we'll see if there's any other comments.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you, Jesse, for that. And I think at this point, I'll just pause to see if any of the board members want to any further comments based on the public comment, or just we'll take those under advisement. Right, so comments are taken under advisement. And so there is a draft resolution in your packet, and that is on page 25, and that was to approve of the report card. Although I think with the amount of comments for a little more additional information or clarity, mainly tweaks, not really seeing anything for major changes to measures or anything to that effect. However, I think what we'll do is take the comments that we received, make some edits or additions, and add the supplemental information so that everyone has the information that's going to be further explaining some of the measures or the status of them, and then bring it back for next month. And so why don't we plan to entertain this resolution to approve next month, and we'll have staff take the comments that were received today and do a little further work on the report. Right. Okay. So, public member Nelson, go ahead.
I noticed that that there was a February 5th intention of publishing date. Is that statutory, or is there?
Board member Nelson, not statutory. It was something we were aiming for. We thought having this report out might be useful prior to the legislative session starting on February 12th. But I think with the list of things and particular questions about the trends, what we can do is address those and let you all look at another version. And I am just looking here for a second to just double check what our February meeting date is. I believe it is the 21st. And so we would have it, I think then we could publish pretty quick after that, because we'll have had time to make those changes. So it's a little bit of delay, but there is not a statutory requirement, no.
Thank you, Executive Director Nuschler. Thanks for that question, Board Member Nelson. Right. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you for the review, the comments, the discussion on this today, and we'll look forward to bringing this back for further discussion and hopefully passing the resolution next month. So then that brings us to the strategic plan, draft mission and outcomes. Executive Director Nuschler will give an update on the strategic plan process, again, including the draft mission and outcomes, and present the plan for the February board meeting. So at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Edie Nuschler.
Again, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm sorry I'm the entire lineup today on a bunch of different things. So, all right. Okay. Sorry, I'm again trying this new way of sharing things so that I can show you the slides and see my notes on one place. Okay. I wanted to give you all an update on how we're planning how I'm continuing to think through and move forward with the strategic plan refresh, taking into account all the great discussion that we had in November in our breakout rooms. And today, what I want to talk through and what's in your packet are the mission and outcomes that I drafted and have discussed with the staff after the discussion that we had in November. So we're not making any final decisions today, but I do want to see how board members are feeling about those choices as we're planning for another discussion in February about the strategies that we would be using to implement the mission and outcomes. So we want to make sure we have a good set of outcomes for moving forward. So first, the mission statement, just a brief reminder that what we want is something that's very specific to who we are, that helps ourselves and others really clearly understand what we are here to do and be motivated to support it. To describe also how our efforts impact those we serve and partner with, and it's going to serve to shape what we do on a regular basis over the time period of the strategic plan. So this is the current mission statement, which we discussed at the meeting in November. Based on the input from all of you, this is a draft proposed new mission statement. It's two-part, the main part being to support Minnesotans in making informed decisions that protect and enhance the state's environmental quality, and then a subpart with that starts to point towards the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and how we work in terms of talking about meaningful conversations, collaborative policy development, and ensuring effective environmental review. So at this point, I just want to ask a couple of questions and just sort of see like what words or phrases catch your attention here? What questions do you have about the mission? What implications does it have for us? Generally moving towards this idea of, are we in agreement with this? Is this, this isn't your final say or your final chance to have a say on the mission statement, but does it capture what we talked about as the key role of EQB? And is it enough to provide a good foundation for moving forward with thinking about the strategies that we're going to implement? So in other words, does it provide the right basis, even if we might want to come back and tweak the language later? So thoughts, questions, implications. I'd like to hear your thoughts at this time.
Thank you, E.D. Nuschler, and I see a hand up by Commissioner Stroman. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Daubenberger and Director Nuschler. I have a question that I'll just put out for discussion because it caught me, and I've been thinking about it, and I'm not sure I've come to a conclusion, but where it says the EQB's mission is to support Minnesotans in making informed decisions. Is it really Minnesotans broadly? I mean, in some respects it is, but particularly when we get to environmental review, it's decisions made by certain decision makers. I mean, I'm not sure the EQB's influence and decisions at an individual level is sufficient that it rises to mission statement. So I'll leave it there. Again, I'm still sort of unsettled, but that piece did strike me as something that didn't maybe seem totally aligned with where EQB sits in that.
Thank you for that comment, and see if anyone wants to chime in on that.
So this is Katrina. I appreciate that. I hadn't looked at it that way, but now that you say that, the mission is to support Minnesotans in making informed decisions that protect and enhance the state's environmental quality. Certainly, I think we can all agree that part of the mission is to engage in Minnesotans in the decision-making process that protect and enhance environmental quality. But to Sarah's point, I don't want to set up false expectations. talk a lot these days about, frankly, power sharing and who gets to make decisions and who gets to influence decisions. And those types of words really matter in how we position ourselves and others to be a part of a process. So that's my reaction to that. I think it's a good point.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. And so Board Member Hintz, go ahead.
Yeah, I have maybe a different, since we're entering that discussion, I have a different thought about it, which is just, and I don't know if I don't know the best case here. I just want to offer a comparison for potentially including the support directly of Minnesotans in making informed decision, because I don't know who else is doing that work. And I think individual agencies and hopefully would say this themselves don't always have the staff capacity or relationships to do the work with individual residents. And EQB is supposed to be a collaborative organization, and you have public members serving on it. And so it feels like there has to be some entity that is providing some level of translation to individuals. So thinking about when individual Minnesotans are making decisions, what information do they need to know, and where are their vulnerabilities? So if I were looking at why am I serving on this board and what I would like the vision or mission to be, it would be that we are in fact doing that, and that serves a need I don't know that other entities are filling right now. But it is, I think, it is like kind of a weighty decision, because that would inform how we go about our decision making, if it is really targeting those specific people, or if, you know, or if it's not. So.
Thank you, Board Member Hintz. And then we'll go to Board Member Foster.
Yeah, I had the same, that's the same place where I got hung up a little bit thinking about this to support Minnesotans. And I kind of landed where Board Member Hintz landed, is that it's kind of that I couldn't think of anything better, in the sense that could be support and then we name certain types of organizations. I wouldn't want it to be just to support, government organizations. And so I think it would be difficult to refashion this into something that would be more specific. It would have to redo and not have support. I think when I kind of reconciled myself to it, it was that we support Minnesotans. It's mostly in an indirect way. Things like the environmental report card, engaging with the pollinator action framework, those sorts of things. Those other things we do that filter down into affecting giving citizens information. I think that links to a second comment I had, which was in the sub part of that. We accomplish this by fostering meaningful conversations. It seems like the meaningful conversations, if they are, involving those other than just the government agencies, then that is a little more direct in supporting Minnesotans. But I also see that as I look at it in my limited experience, the fostering meaningful conversations part is maybe the part where the EQB has done the least compared to the other two. And so I think those two are linked in some way. So in the end, I kind of thought it's okay to keep it like that, although those concerns are really true. And I think that if we keep to support Minnesotans, have to be very intentional about saying we are going to do more to foster meaningful conversations in a variety of different spaces.
Thank you, Board Member Foster. And then we'll go back to Commissioner Stroman.
This is exactly why I raised this for some discussion, because I think this is a really good discussion that the board should be having, right? Like what is the right role, and how do the words and the mission reflect that? And so, I mean, I do think we could leave it this way, and it might change the emphasis of some of the work that we do, right? So that we are supporting Minnesotans in a broader sense. And I think we do some of that work now. I just wouldn't describe all, the thrust of I wouldn't summarize all of our work in that category. Or I think our mission is to, foster Minnesotans' participation in informed decisions, right? Or Minnesotans' ability to inform decisions. I mean, I think there's just a matter of emphasis there. And again, I'm not really advocating which one is the right one. I'm still kind of on the fence, but I think there is a subtle difference. And I think what Commissioner Kessler said, and others have said, it sort of echoes that, right? Like, and where do we want the EQB's emphasis to be? Because it will fall out from what this mission says.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments, Commissioner Stroman, and we'll go next back to Board Member Hintz.
Yeah, I think my kind of refined thinking would be, I would support leaving it as is because it feels a bit more aspirational. However, the way that we do that work, how we support Minnesotans, is still to be defined by work plans. So the aspirational piece allows for flexibility if there is a broader push to shift the work and try to do more of the meaningful conversation piece. But if that capacity isn't there, that doesn't mean we're not supporting Minnesotans anymore. It just means we're doing it in a way that's, as Commissioner Stroman said, giving them access to be part of the conversations or however that's framed. But I don't think it has to change the mission necessarily.
Thank you, Board Member Hintz. Appreciate that. Okay, other comments, thoughts? I will say, as I reviewed this, I kind of went through this same thought process and came back to being good with the way it is because it's broad and it does speak to Minnesotans who are proposing projects, those who are reviewing projects, those who are making policies, those who are part of government agencies. It's very broad. And I think those are all people we want to reach as we're putting together this mission. So those are my thoughts on it. All right, back to you, Edie Nuschler.
Thank you. And thank you all for that thoughtfulness. I think kind of what Chair Daubenberger just said and what Board Member Foster was saying is kind of where I was going, and it's how do you wrap together the RGU decision making, the supporting policy development, and I think things like this idea that hopefully the energy environment report card, the pollinator report card will trickle down to what people are doing in their day-to-day lives. So I think what I'm taking away at this point is that this is sort of directionally, generally correct, and will support us having continuing conversations, and then we can circle back to potentially wordsmith it as we go through. And I think, some of the stuff that Board Member Hintz brought up in terms of, or Board Member Foster as well, about like, what are we doing well? That's a great segue to what we want to talk about next month. So the next pieces in the packet, and you got two versions of a draft strategic plan memo, is the outcomes. So I chose to use the phrase outcomes rather than priority results, which is what's in the current version. But this is really about what do we aspire to achieve in our work. And I drafted this section based on our discussion around the current 6 priority results that we had in November. And I think one of the key questions we had there, oh, sorry, I think I'm jumping ahead on my slides. So with the current 6 priority results of this, are these still things that we want to work on based on the vision and the mission? Are these things that we want to look at over the next 5 years? Do the outcomes align with the mission conversation? Why or why not? and then the keep, drop, change. So these were the questions we went through in November. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there, but based on your all discussions on that, that's where I drafted the two versions of the way it might move forward. Option 1 includes 4 specific values drawn from the current strategic plan, and though not necessarily from the values that are espoused in the current strategic plan, and they aren't shared in the high level version, but then also from pieces of the current priority results and your discussion. And so those are collaboration, engagement, equity, and trust. And so those were pulled out as sort of, this is the way that we want to do all of our work, and that the values will be incorporated in all the pieces of our work. And then there are the outcomes, or more details about what we want to accomplish in order to advance our mission. And then from your conversations, I took away a lot about the importance of being a space for dialogue and conversation, that policy development is important, and we need to think about how to articulate the role of EQB specifically, and then of course our more well-defined role in environmental review. And I'll note that should we choose to move ahead more in this framework of values and outcomes, we could certainly think about having a strategy related to each outcome that focuses on maybe something we need to specifically do to better integrate that value in that area. And then the second version does not specifically include values, but it instead adds 2 outcomes that focus more specifically on accomplishing some of the key values. So we have those same 3 about conversations, policy development, and environmental review, but then also sort of engage all Minnesotans in working towards healthy and sustainable environmental quality, and ensure that historically underrepresented groups are actively included, and an outcome of being a trusted partner in the collaborative work of enhancing Minnesota's long-term environmental quality. So basically, to prepare for February, what we need to do is have a sense of which of these outcomes we should move forward into that facilitated discussion to discuss strategies that we want to put forward that would help us reach each outcome. So you can think of it like each outcome is the goal, and the way these are constructed, they are really kind of long-term goals that are going to stand for the whole 5-year period. And then we'll be looking to have a conversation about strategies, the work to be done over the next 1 to 3 years that will help us progress towards or reach each outcome. So an example might be the outcome is maintain and improve environmental review. Strategy 1 might be provide guidance and training to support RGUs. Strategy 2 might be regularly evaluate EQB's technical assistance. And so those strategies then might would help us decide. They kind of fit between the outcome and our regular work plan, and those strategies would help us decide then what to put on our work plan. So if we perhaps chose one of these strategy but not the other, when we were looking at our work plan, that would guide our priorities about picking the work we take on. If there's more work that we have capacity to do, we'd focus on the strategies that have been designated. And to kind of, I think the exercise that we're going to do next month as well, we do want to talk about the outcomes that we're going to put forward and sort of say, well, what's the current situation here? Where do we need to be? And what are the strategies that need to help us make that transition, to fill that gap? And so I think to the conversation we were just having about, is facilitating conversations between regular Minnesotans something we do well? Well, maybe it isn't, and maybe there are things, and then we would specifically hone in our strategies to help us move towards meeting our outcomes. So, as you read these outcomes, again, what's catching your attention? Which ones work and will be helpful to us? Are there limitations or gaps that you notice? And I will say, really, at this point, just looking for a sense of which ones of these we want to move into our discussion in February. And kind of the key question to that is sort of, do you want to include the values within the outcomes or separate them out? And then are these the right outcomes you want to develop strategies to achieve for to put forward for our conversation in February. I know in the packet, I kind of said, which option do you like? But they're not necessarily completely separate. They could be hybridized. So that's what I'm looking for at this point, is just direction on which outcomes to bring forward for that facilitated discussion on strategies next month. And that is my last slide, Madam Chair. So.
All right, thank you, Director Nuschler. And yeah, what are thoughts from folks on outcomes to bring forward and the questions that you see here up on the slide? So go ahead, Commissioner Kessler.
Yeah, thanks. Director Nuschler kind of previewed what I was going to say. I mean, I think the values should reflect the work that we are prioritizing in the strategic plan. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves. If we are aspiring to support Minnesotans in making informed decisions, then we need to talk about what that support looks like and how to do that well. And that's really hard. I will say that, you know, this is, I would point at some of these other things and say that we as career civil servants who are thinking about processes and regulations are much better at number 2 and number 3 than we are at number 1. And so if this is the work that we want to hold up as where we want to be, then I think that we should spend some time thinking about what that looks like and what it will take to get there.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Any others thoughts on this? Board Member Bauer Kemper, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. So I guess in a sort of more abstract, broader scope, I would say that I'm a little conflicted in the sense that I'm assertively supportive of the list of values that's here, but as it currently stands, it seems like, well, depending on how this process goes in February and on, if we are going to have the key outcomes drive our conversation, then because of my investment in the values, I like the version that doesn't list the values because they are more clearly represented in the key outcomes that are going to drive the strategies that we evolve or that we elaborate. However, you also mentioned, Executive Director Nuschler, maybe a process through which we would start developing strategies and then check in back with the values to see how those are being present there. So I'm not entirely sure what the next step of the process is. If the next step of the process is going to be driven by the key outcomes, then I like the version with 5 because those key outcomes better reflect the values. If there's going to be a process that goes back to ensure the values are included in the strategies, you know, well, maybe I have a different view and I like the statement of the values being real conspicuous. And I might also like 3 outcomes rather than 5. But, you know, so I don't have anything particularly decisive or useful to say, except that, like I said, because of my investment in those values, when comparing these 2 versions, I'm drawn toward the version with the 5 outcomes because those values seem more likely to be operationalized. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Bauer Kemper. And I would submit that was useful. All right. Then we have the next hand up, Board Member Martin. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I thought about this, and I think I'm in the same place as Board Member Bauer Kemper. Like, I think it's really important to say what your values are and that those permeate all your work. But I'm also like, I think the way you put it, Joseph, was great. Like, if you build those values into the outcomes, then you really have to operationalize them and you have to hold yourself accountable. And the piece of this that I think is the most difficult, like I think, you know, EQB does a great job at generally engaging the public, but the piece about you know, really ensuring historically underrepresented groups are actively included is hard, you know, and it takes different techniques and so on. So the reason I'm incline more toward the 5 is that would be a specific outcome that we actually have to sort of like assess how well are we doing that, as opposed to if it's just a value and equity is sort of rolled in along with generally collaboration and engagement. It could just, it could disappear a little bit. Not that it wouldn't still be our value, but it's just we wouldn't be like tracking it quite as, we wouldn't be holding ourselves accountable as if it were like actually built into a outcome 4 and we were like, oh boy, we haven't done so well on this outcome this year. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's what leads me to be more, to lean more toward the version with 5.
Thank you, Board Member Martin. All right, and then the next hand we have is Board Member Foster. Go ahead.
So the comments by my 2 fellow board members capture what I've been thinking exactly. So this isn't very helpful probably, but because we all are like, well, both of them could be good. I think that's really important to think about. I'll just add that when I think about the values, and I think board member Nelson was just referring to this, that if we have 4, collaboration, engagement, equity, and trust, one of these is not like the others in a way. Equity is a big challenge and area, and whereas collaboration, engagement, those are similar, and they're things that already kind of are embedded in the kinds of work we do. So I'm a little wary of having this set of values be set apart because equity seems to stand out among those 4 in a way as for work needed. So I mean, and then when I look at number 4, if we have the 5 there listed, number 4 then becomes not exactly about equity, but about engaging all Minnesotans, which is a pretty tall order, right? This idea of engaging all Minnesotans. So another option might be to have 4 key outcomes, and the 4th one would be something specifically about the equity part of what we want to achieve in our work. And, collaboration, engagement seem to be imbued through what we do. We might name those as values. Because I think number 5, EQB as a trusted partner, it doesn't seem to be the same as the others either. It's kind of through doing our other work, we establish ourselves as a trusted partner. So it doesn't seem as much as an outcome, a key outcome, as would something to do with ensuring that historically underrepresented groups are actively included.
Thank you, Board Member Foster. Other thoughts? All right, not seeing any other hands up or hearing anything more. Back to you, Edie Nuschler, for any further discussion on this? Or is this what you were hoping to get out of this agenda item is where we're at now?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, board members. It is helpful to know when there seems to be sort of a consensus. So even though you were maybe saying, well, just repeating what someone else said, it's helpful to know when many of you feel that way. So I think this is enough that I can operationalize. Well, I shouldn't say that. Set up the February discussion in a way that should give us some good grounding. And I am taking to heart. And I think the whole part of the 2 options is what's the best way to operationalize and assess and evaluate our work on some of these key values. And so appreciate you sharing all of that. And I will think about what we're all saying. And put something together for a discussion in February. I think you can probably expect to be asked about those three outcomes that were in both, and potentially a 4th one, and then about the idea of are there specific sort of holes or gaps in the way we're implementing the values that need strategies to ensure that they really are permeating the outcome that we're going for, is the best way I can think to say it. But I'll be working with our facilitators. I think we've got a good setup preliminarily to get some of those things illustrated, and we will have a good discussion in February. So thank you for this.
Hey, well, thank you for all your work compiling what all you heard in November to what we had here in our packet and discussed today, so that we can start moving this forward on our vision, our mission, our values, our outcomes. So on that note, then I think that brings us to the next agenda item, which is the end of the meeting public comment period. And so with that, for any of those members of the public who would like to comment, please raise your hand, and then Jesse will call on you and you'll be able to unmute when he promotes you, essentially. So, and thank you for the reminder slide on the screen about how to raise your hand in Teams. All right. Any public commenters here today for this portion?
Madam Chair, we have an Ashley Holmes with their hand raised. Ashley, as soon as you are able to, you can unmute and present your comment.
Thank you very much for your time and today and putting up this this meeting. I have a couple questions or just some things that I've observed. This last portion that you were talking about with equity, I'm wondering about these meetings, and if you're really wanting to reach out to those underrepresented groups, why you are having these meetings in the middle of the day when most of the most people who are in the underrepresented communities are probably working, have families and things and such not, where they need to make an income. So these issues are very important and important to all Minnesotans, like you were mentioning, but I feel like if you want to really have that inclusion, setting where you have time to have these meaningful conversations is an important one, so that people are able to attend. So that was my one comment from that last bit. And then secondly, I was wondering about this report card being, whereas you had omitted the line 3, which really does highlight the air, the soil, the water, and all the rest of it. So I'm just kind of wondering, have you looked at the negative externalities of line 3 and why you haven't really put that into your report card? The environmental carbon emissions, risk of spills, wildlife, contaminated water sources, soil and air, social, indigenous rights, drug and sex trafficking, community disruption, quality of life, economic, communities heavily reliant on oil extraction and transportation on a non-renewable resource, which could hinder development of more sustainable and diverse economies. So I guess I'm wondering, and also the abandoning of the line 3, whereas right now, line 93, what they just had, well, now I'm just running around here, but hold on for just a second. So the compromise between Enbridge and the Department of Commerce will require oil companies to pay more than $61 million per year into a decommissioning fund for Line 93 until 2041. The PUC greenlit this compromise and is estimating it's at $1.25 billion to pull out the new pipeline, which is the Pipeline 93, out of the ground at the end of its useful life cycle to transition away from fossil fuel. I'm just wondering why we aren't also trying to get that done for line 3 as well, instead of just leaving it where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for your comments and questions. Any other commenters from the public?
Madam Chair, at this time, there are no other hands raised.
All right, thank you, Jesse. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. I'll just pause, see if there are any comments from board members on anything at this point before we look to close and adjourn the meeting. Great. Not seeing any hands or hearing anything. We will then go to the last agenda item, which is closing and adjourning the meeting. So first of all, thank you, board members, all for your participation today, and those from the public who also participated and commented. We've reached the end of the agenda. So is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Public member Foster, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, board member Foster. May I have a second on the motion?
Commissioner Arnold, I will second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. All those in favor, say aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to say nay? All right, hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you again for your participation today, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Stay warm out there.